All right, so yesterday on Sunday, the 13th of November, the sad news broke that former professional mixed martial arts fighter Anthony Rumble Johnson has passed away at the age of 38. At the time, the reason behind his death, it was undisclosed, but further details have been revealed today. So let's talk about it. Before I talk about Rumble, I just want to say, right, so obviously UFC 281 happened on Saturday night, and I had set this time aside on Monday evening after work to sit down and talk about the fights. And on Sunday afternoon, when I saw that tweet from Ariel Helwani that Rumble's passed away, it just felt off. It just felt off for me to sit down talking about the fights without acknowledging the fight that Rumble was in. Like I said, when the news broke, the cause of death was undisclosed. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit later on. But I've just seen kind of news today confirming that unfortunately Rumble was suffering from a form of cancer, Hodgkin's lymphoma, and it's an autoimmune disease. And he died of organ failure after a long fight with the illness. So if we put this in the context of his career, because obviously he retired from MMA whilst he was a UFC fighter, and he was away from the sport for a couple of years, and then he returned to Bellator, and he made his debut, or he had his only Bellator fight back in May 2021 against the Brazilian guy Jose Augusto Azevedo. So he won that fight in typical Rumble fashion, with a KO, and it meant that he was going to progress in the Bellator light heavyweight tournament. Obviously, it wasn't to be, and ever since then, there's been murmurs about this illness that he's got, this long-term illness, and I don't know about you guys, but in my head, it just felt like, because these, not all MMA fighters, but Rumble especially, because majority of these fighters are in kind of such good physical condition, you just assume that, okay, whatever this illness is, it's just something that is temporary, and they'll be back fighting at their best. So I'd been hearing every couple of months you'd hear, oh, Rumble's sick, but I just kind of didn't really think much of it until obviously yesterday when the news broke. And the circumstances in which the news broke, right, with it being undisclosed, the reason bit for, or the cause of his death. One thing that I kind of hate about social media, or just people in general, is I saw on the timeline speculation around the cause of his death, and I saw people kind of trying to discuss potential inherent risks and issues in the sport, weight cutting, and just kind of speculating around, the damage that fighters take, and that having a direct effect on Rumble, and that's why he passed away. And I just kind of looked at that and I thought, fucking hell, man, there's a reason why there's a saying, there's a time and a place, because it's just become public knowledge. And I feel like the geezer that's passed away and his family and loved ones deserve the respect to not sit there and just kind of make up theories in your mind and put that out in public about a guy that gave so much to the sport. That's just what people are like nowadays. Like just acknowledge the fact that a fighter's passed away and it's sad for the people around him. Let's not sit there and start talking about why you think he may have passed away. All right, but that's nothing to do with Rumble himself, because to me, Rumble is probably he's probably the first fighter that I kind of saw his journey in kind of the big leagues from start to finish. You know, the first one that I've seen their journey from start to finish pass away. You know, the sport itself is relatively young. And like Rumble Johnson, I remember when he first came on the scene, like there's so many things that are unique to Rumble in terms of his journey as a fighter, starting as a welterweight, cutting all of that weight. And then I'd say he had so many kind of peaks and troughs in his career, and he had low points, like when he was meant to fight Arlovsky. When was it Arlovsky? Nah, he was meant to fight someone. It wasn't Arlovsky. It was Vitor Belfort. So he moved from welterweight to middleweight, and he missed weight like by a long way for that. Like that was a low for Rumble Johnson. And then after that, he was cut by the UFC, because this is a guy that had been fighting at welterweight, struggling to fight at to make that weight. You know, understandably where he kind of ended up. And then he had to go away from the UFC. And at that point in the context of the sport, when the UFC cut him, there weren't a lot of options around, because if I'm not mistaken, Strikeforce had been taken over. UFC by Strikeforce. Bear with me. Let me just double check this, because I don't want to lie to you guys. No, they hadn't. So at that point, Strikeforce was an option, but he went away, and he fought for Titan FC, and then after Titan FC, World Series of Fighting, which obviously now is PFL. He fought, you know, Arlovsky at heavyweight, and you know, he won that fight at World Series of Fighting. But during that period, it just felt to me like, all right, this guy is just going to turn into a journeyman. And the way he came back as a light heavyweight in the UFC, and the run of wins that he put together to eventually get a shot at the title against Daniel Cormier, which at that point was vacant, because obviously John Jones was doing John Jones shit. And on that run, he beat, the way he beat Gustafsson, because obviously Gustafsson was just coming off of his title challenge, and there was a lot of kind of, rightly so, a lot of hype behind his name. And that fight was in Sweden, in a big old venue, from what I can remember. And when Johnson went in there and knocked Gustafsson out in the first round in a matter of seconds, minutes, a couple of minutes, the silence in that room, because of the way, how brutally he did it. Like, this guy was Francis Ngannou before there was a Francis Ngannou, you know? Like, the way people were talking about Pereira prior to the fight on Saturday night, that's how people were talking about Rumble Johnson. I remember when he beat Jimmy Manuwa, and obviously I was supporting Manuwa in that fight, because that was our guy, not just from England but London, and you know, he was up there. I genuinely felt he had a chance to become champion in the UFC, but Johnson put a stop to that, and I'm not going to lie to you guys, I don't remember him knocking out Ryan Bader strongly, but I tell you what I do remember is the way he finished Glover Teixeira. And he finished Glover Teixeira back in 2016. And just to think, he'd done that in 2016, and Teixeira only recently actually went and won the belt, you know? Like, Johnson was a man that put fear in a lot of people. But aside from him as a fighter, like, just the way he kind of carried himself in obviously didn't know the geezer personally, but the way he carried himself in interviews and the way other people in the sport spoke of him, you can tell that a lot of people held him in high regards, and that says a lot, right? Because I don't ever recall a fighter ever talking bad about Rumble. Everyone always seemed to have nice things to say about Rumble, and Rumble was one of those guys that actually, whilst he was at the peak of his career in the UFC, in the title picture for the light heavyweight title, he would call out the John Jones of this world and Daniel Cormier, etc. But he would always do it like respect. Like, he had the perfect balance of being able to tell a man he's going to beat the shit out of him, but also compliment the man in the same sentence, because he did that on a regular basis with Cormier and John Jones. And you know, there's been a lot of tribute messages coming in from those guys, John Jones, Cormier, etc., etc. John Jones put out a really nice post on his Instagram about Rumble, but yeah, it was a shock, man. It's a shock. People die, innit? People die, but you just don't expect it, especially, you know, at this right now. The guy was 38 years old, which is nothing. It's nothing. And after the break that he had from MMA, when after 2017, when he lost to Cormier in that second attempt he had for the title, he decided he was going to retire. And he said in the octagon, you know, my heart's not really in it anymore. And he went off and done other things, man. I'm pretty sure he started a weed company. He started lifting weights and got fucking huge tonk. He lived a full life, it seems, looking at it from the outside. And the way he pulled it back from when he got released by the UFC to where he ended up when he finally retired in 2017, headlining shows, probably getting paid well, setting his family up. You got to give it to the man. You could tell he had grown a lot. And you'd imagine, you know, you want people to grow a lot, right? Because when he first made his debut in the UFC, that was back in what were we talking? Back in 2007, he started off in the UFC, right? And when he finished in 2017, that's a whole 10 years, right? So obviously he's going to grow. But it was so obvious to see the growth in him, the way he carried himself, the way he spoke. He just seemed quite like a grateful bloke, to be honest. So it's sad news, man. It's a big loss for the sport. But I mean, it is what it is, man. The guy gave us so many good memories, so many heavy knockouts. Rumble Johnson, what a guy, what a fighter he was. Put your memories of Johnson in the comments below, and let's acknowledge just how good he was and how much he gave to the sport for our entertainment. But yeah, I think that's it. Thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.